So thank you very much for joining the panel. It's quite a broad panel and we cover a lot of ground amongst us. But I have one opening question that I would like to ask you and get your reflection on, which is that between the IMO targets, EU regulation, and everything that is happening in the States right now with the different US measures, are we heading towards a fragmented regulatory landscape or eventually harmonization? And I would like to take a few perspectives of that before I go into the more individual questions.
From the directorate side, eventually the kind of postponement what has happened or coffee break as we had discussed yesterday, this will only lead to uncertainty in the minds of investors, and especially now since EU ETS is already in play. Now various countries are now they plan to mobilize and roll out their own regional carbon taxes. Like we are aware of that Singapore is already they are almost in the final stages. There are studies being carried out in other neighboring countries also, which I will not mention it, but we are aware of that because we are getting reports and they are asking some data for the these particular studies. So this will only lead to the ships which are plying worldwide that they may be being penalized individually to the countries which they are visiting, and it is not good for shipping. India as such was in we have played a lot of role and we had done lot of work at MEPC to actually formalize the relevant rules, adoption of IMO Net Zero framework in MAPOL Annex 6, and we had also issued few circulars which were of course recommendatory in nature to prepare our Indian ship owners and coastal ship owners to somehow to at least sensitize about the relevant regulations which were coming in. So in my perspective, of course, there are intersessional working groups wherein the LCA guidelines are being prepared. India is also playing a very active role in that. It has given some time, especially if I want to also sensitize our partners of the word CBDRC, common but differentiated responsibilities and capabilities, which was a crucial factor, in putting up resistance what we had at MEPC. Especially we were in talks with Brazil, Mexico, and many other countries, wherein some of the ship owners, international ship owners, or even the governments were highlighting the fact that the CBDRC principle, though, is the baseline for the net zero framework, but still it has not been clearly laid out, like how much funds will be going to which countries. Like the countries which are developed, they have some responsibility to the countries which are developing, and SID, especially the small developing nations and all, island nations. So, yeah. So from this was our aspect. Like at the directorate, we are trying to do whatever we can so that the relevant rules are made in favor of our country. Thank you.
So, Jeppe, I have a question for you. Because we all know that on short term we are most likely to rely on energy efficiency and probably some kind of biofuels. On the longer game, however, we know that there's not, unfortunately, a magic wand that can do the trick. So we're going from a monofuel world into a multi-fuel world with all the complexities that entail. And we know that ammonia and methanol is going to be part of the end game. In view of you, with all the different policy frameworks that you have seen, what policy frameworks would you feel that are needed to scale the green fuels like ammonia and methanol?
Thank you, and thank you for a very complex question. I will try to chip in from some Danish perspectives, and maybe I think, and also from a regulatory side. I think the most important thing we can do is to reduce the risk for investors and create a clear direction. That's not a simple task, but I think that's a task we need to take on, and this needs to happen on global level, regional level, but also on national level. And I think the net zero framework is a great example, and from a Danish side, we are great supporters, but in the absence of a global uniform framework, The EU is a really good example, setting 90% reduction target for 2040 and net zero goal on 2050, and also implementing a lot of regulations, entire supply chain across the ones that actually needs to take on the risk and producing these fuels and consuming these fuels. They can do it confidently, and they know which direction we are headed. And I think it's important to know where we're going, so we know that the investments, they will not fail in 2 years, and you're like, okay, maybe I should have picked some other fuel. This is not to pick winners, but make the market find the most efficient ways. And again, the FuelEU Maritime is a good example of that, and the ETS to help reducing the price gap, because this is premium fuels and much more expensive for the ones the maritime sector are using now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mads, turning to you. Let's assume that the world gets what it needs, a global regulation. So how can the maritime authorities ensure that we have a consistent enforcement of global decarbonization rules across all these countries that takes part of a global framework?
Yes. That is one of the big challenges, is always in how do we enforce these regulations that we are trying to create. One of the big factors will be to have a clear and easy control method on board the ships. So when we both see port state controls or flag state controls, that they are able to quickly go through, because they have a lot of different tasks when they are doing these controls. What's the situation on the ship, the status on it. This could also potentially, as we wanted to move into a more digitalized version of this, both from the perspective in IMO with the GFI registry and the DCS data that we're collecting there. So the goal is to have an easy way to look into how the ship are doing specifically. So I think that's the way forward.
I definitely agree with you that digitalization is probably one of the strong enforcing mechanisms that we could have to get that across-border alignment. So, Jagabanta, we are having you have worked a lot with doing different modeling things, so it could be interesting to discuss a little bit with you how global maritime, how policy-driven financial mechanisms are most effective to accelerate the decarbonization. So is it the carrot or the stick? The States went very much with the stick. Europe went with with the carrot. Europe went with the stick. What's your view on that?
I think it's a bit of both. This is with any sector, but within shipping, I can contextualize it. You need supply-side ways to encourage the new fuels to come about, and that's the onus has gone to at least from the India perspective, it's gone to the government of India. The mission does a very good job. States are topping that up with their industrial and green hydrogen policy. That's a supply basket. And of course, you could do the demand aggregation and you're able to get to an even better price point. The middle is, of course, to do with how do you bridge, or at least do the partial work of bridging the cost premium. And that's essentially where the framework comes in, or the FuelEU, as well as the EU ETS comes in the regional sense. The third is the demand aggregation bit, right? So the offtake guarantee allows for the suppliers to be, or the developers to be able to put in the money. I think the bridge is where governments and multilateral initiatives in helping bridge those price points starts coming in, right? And all three have to work together if you really wanted to achieve scale in setting off decarbonization at the early stage. And my colleagues, Ankur highlighted, corridor is essentially part of the early stages of how do you create this market, right? So you are not necessarily going to see, like, if you don't have a focused approach, you're not going to be able to see that volume coming in at the time that you want it to come in to make, for many of these to make sense. Hence, the slight focus on corridors. Second thing is, I think, the beauty with the shipping is that it's interlinked to trade. And if there's any reality to this green hydrogen and green ammonia story, is the latest Uniper offtake agreement that just got concluded. Right? It's a trade agreement, I agree, but to transport those molecules, if you want true sustainability, you need to add on a sustainable way to transport. And that's where the shipping story starts coming in, right? So the volume doesn't have to come from one industry as well. And that's essentially where the clusters and corridors approach, at least how RMI likes to think about green hydrogen starts coming in. These are all common molecules around which deep industrialization is happening. Shipping happens to be a vertical where mandates and internationally applicable mandates could anchor early demand. And that's essentially where everyone is banking on it, but it goes beyond it. And you need to allow for the demand aggregation to happen at that point. But that's how I would frame that answer.
Thank you very much. Quite interesting. So Ankur, you're doing a lot of modeling of various decarbonization pathways and looking into different mechanisms that could help us to decarbonize the shipping industry. So I would be grateful to get your perspective on how do you see the global maritime policy influencing these different pathways? Is it the only lever, or are there other ways, and how efficient is it?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, that's a very interesting question because majority of us, just believe on the numbers that we see on the slides and the screens usually. So when it comes to modeling, what I usually say is that modeling is as good as a modeler, and modeler is as good as the assumptions, right? So whatever you assume, you define in your scenarios, that actually looks at. So first, coming to your question that, there is only one lever, it's not the case actually. You look at the IMO as one lever to do so. It's obviously the highest impact lever in the modeling scenarios as well. But then you start looking at the regional policies as well. The impact is less. Obviously, you look at the numbers, the competitiveness does not emerge immediately, but it will come in. So eventually, the most important thing that modeling helps you understand is the uncertainty in the system that exists, right? Until the project has happened, everything is just a calculation. So that uncertainty that comes with that calculation helps us develop those scenarios better. There is a scenario, if you look at my slide, that there is an optimistic IMO case. And then there is a moderate IMO case, that how the rewards will be given. Because even today, that ZNC rewards framework is still getting to have that clarity in, that how it will be implemented and how it will be coming out. So the economics that we are seeing in the reports now are actually making a lot of sense, given the fact that the consensus framework that we are expected to happen come in. For majority of the other sectors now, you see that all these things start making sense already. I can give you one example, that the last mile cost of your molecule, that once you have produced, but you have to take it to the port, right? That last mile cost, if you have scale from 50 KTPA to 300 KTPA, the cost can decline from $700 to $100. That's the decline that you see. That can only be clarified when you do these kind of techno-economics and you bring out the lever to the right policymakers and the partners that, hey, this is the cost that you see. Then there is a development of a mechanism. How do you aggregate the demand for shipping as one sector? But then around the port, you have the whole ecosystem. Can you have that 300 KTPA mark match so that this last mile cost can be reduced and you have a set of scale which can help further decline the cost for everything else you are doing. So that's how I'm seeing it in the techno-economics and the modeling space.
Thank you very much. Then I'd like to turn to Anjan, DSK Legal. My question to you is turning a little bit to India and zooming in on India here. So with the revised timeline in the adoption of IMO's net zero framework, does that mean opportunities for strengthening India's green shipping policy internally? Does that give you more time?
Yeah. No, so see, from a legal and regulatory perspective, whatever we see, see it through the lens of three things, which is clarity, certainty, and enforceability, right? These are the three broad heads which any business is looking for, whether it's the green shipping industry or whether the green fuels industry, everyone is looking at that. Now, if you obviously, this is a setback, and which we have all acknowledged. Having said that, this uncertainty, India has kind of, during this period, has also progressed in its own ways. So for example, I don't know how many of us know about it, there were these maritime laws that we had. India has actually revamped all of it. There were 5 maritime laws which have come out last year, right? So what is happening actually, those are more like the base right? Those have been revamped, those have been now put up to particular standard in terms of the global order. And now what is happening is the subordinate legislations are going to come out. And that's where all of these get plugged in. So I think India has done its bit and it's progressing. Obviously, this is part of a larger ecosystem, and like a lot of the others also, especially MNRE also mentioned that, look, at the end of the day, it's not only about hydrogen, it's the whole ecosystem itself, right? So it's progressing well. The Singapore-India corridor, right? The bits and pieces, like our 3 hubs, which is Tuticorin, Kandla, Paradeep. All of these are step in the right direction. So I would say India has utilized this time well, and it's actually progressed well and worked well for us.
Thank you very much. And then finally, Pravin, I have a question which is slightly different from the other ones from you, because we all know that there are challenges with the new fuels. So ammonia is toxic, methanol is corrosive. How do the safety frameworks balance encouraging adoption while managing the risks?
This particular issue has been highlighted previously by other speakers also regarding the capacity building and training. So quickly I just want to sum up that we are in process of formulating the National Green Shipping Policy, NGSP, which is based on 7 pillars. So the draft report was just released last week at India Habitat Center with Terry, which is our partner in National Center of Excellence for Green Ports and Green Shipping. So these particular issues related to the handling of green fuels, which is new not only to the industry, but even for seafarers who will be actually sleeping on, tons and tons of ammonia, which are corrosive and poisonous, or various type of green fuels, whatever we are discussing, methanol and all. The framework for training of seafarers is one of the crucial pillars out of 7 pillars of the NGSP document. And in conjunction with reputed owner companies, fuel producers, Directorate is actually formulating, and we have also put up paper in the STCW just recently. It has been done at London Convention. Intersessional working group. So this is being addressed, the topic what you have just raised, and we are ensuring that before we have some guidelines, but of course when it's going on a larger level, we will be ensuring that our seafarers, which is in top 3, we are the top 3 nations providing seafarers to the world. We will be ensuring that they are well trained and safety picture is specially taken care before they sail on the vessel.
Thank you very much. I had a trillion question prepared for these guys because it's a very, very good panel. But having said that, then we are running out of time. So I'm going to end it here. But I would like to end on a positive note and share a little bit of cautious climate hope with you guys, because obviously we are looking into the developments. And if you look at the International Energy Agency's predictions over the last 5 years, they all go up a little bit and then they flatten out, both on solar, wind, and batteries. And interestingly enough is that reality is definitely superseding that, because the reality has gone through the roof in here. So we are seeing almost exponential installation of solar, wind, and batteries. On top of that, costs are decreasing, and they have almost decreased more than 100% over the last 10 years, so that's significant. Further, I'd like to add that with regard to the shipping industry, that when we started the center 4 or 5 years ago, we discussed whether this was technologically possible. Today, we are not discussing that anymore. We all know the technologies are there. I know it's arrogant to say that, but because some still need to be invented, but more or less the technologies are there. So now it's about adoption and it's about scaling. Creating new business framework, creating certainty for investors, creating the demand. So I think a lot is happening. So when some of the activists say that nothing is happening, I would say that the adults is doing a lot and that we are definitely progressing quite well. It has to happen a lot faster, but I think you can all hear from the discussions here today that India is a growing part of this game, and some of the trends that I just mentioned is definitely also due to India's strong leadership in this field. So with that, I'd like to thank the panel. I would have loved to talk to you for much longer time, but hopefully we'll get the opportunity later. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Mr. Bhupinder Bhala to felicitate all the speakers and our moderator, please.